So thank you everybody for attending today. I'm excited to talk to you about what potentially our future is in ventilation. It's very important and goes hand in hand with the modeling that we do. So we'll just briefly talk about I'll just give a little bit of introduction, our health, safety, and environment criteria, some goals that we have, some challenges that we have, the journey that we may be on, likely be on, and then just some concluding remarks. I like to start with this slide. I think it's a very important one. It's the foundation. It's the things that, what is our purpose, what never changes, and what's likely to change for us, and how do we adapt? So we know that we design and manage systems that protect our employees. That's fundamentally our purpose, especially in underground mining. What will never change is that air is required for life. It's necessary to protect our employees, and it is considered a primary safety control in the underground mining environment. So we'll never forget that, and that will never change, no matter what happens to us in the future. But the way we will likely change is that we need to be more focused on our environmental targets. We need to really focus on having a safe work environment, no matter where we operate, no matter where we have employees. We will start depending more heavily on our supply chain partners, our industry co-partners, our academic partners. That is something we're going to have to rely on more and more and more as we go into the future. We have to develop new strategies. We have to think smarter. I'm going to come back to, or bring this slide up again. This slide was originally, I developed it for the Global Mining Group when we did the first battery electric version of a guideline for the industry. And it's just a very simple flow chart, but it is really the fundamental of how we still design today and probably how we will design in the future. So we know that we have certain parameters. We have a mine, we have an ore body. That's what it is. That's not going to change. We have production schedules we lay to that. We have mining, mining intensity. We look at the equipment that we're going to use. And in the future, what we might do is this is where we will insert some technology, and it's how do we bring that technology into our business? From all this, we decide what air volumes we might have based on where we're going to be mining, what activities will happen when, from the very first inception of construction and development all the way to the closure of the mine. And then we look at the volumes that we've selected, and this is where the modeling will start coming into play. I just want to make a distinction that ventilation design is different from modeling. They work hand in hand, they go together, but they are different entities that we need to focus on. So our ventilation design really sets us up, and we can't start modeling until we know what that design is going to look like. But our modeling is very helpful these days. Ian and I were just chatting about what it used to be. We used to have very few options to model because it took so much time, and today it's instantaneous practically. So we've come a long way, and it's been a real benefit for us. So we have to look at, do we have the right airflow underground now? We look at our raise systems, we look at our distribution systems, and we keep refining that, and that's where that's where the modeling is really benefiting us today. We have to look at our climates that we have underground. Are they cold? Are they hot? And we stay in a bit of a loop here until we're satisfied that we have the right distribution. We've made decisions about how we're going to cool our mine. Are we going to put more air to it? Or are we going to have to introduce refrigeration systems? And then we vary again, and we stay in that loop until we're again satisfied. And then we make some of our finalized decisions. So all of this will happen in the modeling world. And then we come out with an optimized ventilation design for our mines. So before we go any further, we need to talk about health, safety, and the environment. And as we just heard, the environment is very important to us these days. It's a social responsibility for our business to keep our employees safe, the well-being of our employees, and also the care for our environment. want to separate safety, talk to that a little bit. We think of safety often as we want to send our employees home without a cut, a bruise, a scrape, or even worse. We want to send them home safe every day. But sometimes we forget about their well-being. The emotional well-being of our employees is just as critical as the safety of our employees. So that's why we're bringing now health safety together. We have a COO of our company today who coined the phrase that we can't have, that safety is a prerequisite to production. You cannot have production until the foundation is laid for safety. You can't separate them. We don't talk about safety and production. It's simply a prerequisite to mine in this day. And if we look at our environment, we need to take very proactive strategies to understand our emissions. We need to care for our employees in our community, or not only our employees, but also in our communities as well. We have to respect the areas that we mine in, the biodiversities that we have. And I like to think that if we have a good environment, we have good health as well, for not only our miners and our employees underground, but also our communities too. Now, if we come back to the environment, there's a term that's going around called net zero. We are striving to reach that as a world. We make commitments to that. We know that mining is required for the products that support us today. That will not change, I believe. I believe we'll always have mining. Even as I talk more about some future slides on, the environment, mining is still always going to be there, which is good for us. We just have to change about how we think about mining. We know that we have climate change problems we have to focus on. We know it's a global problem, and we know it is our social responsibility as every business that's in here, no matter how we represent the mining community, whether we're industry, whether we're suppliers, whether we're academia, we have that social responsibility that we always have to be thinking about. How are we going to get there? Through circular economies. I'll talk a bit about that in a minute. We need to be data-driven, and I will talk about this in future slide as well. We look at recycling, and I think today we think that we are doing okay on recycling. We look at lithium-ion batteries. We have mountains of them. I think it's just like our garbage today. We pass it off to other countries to deal with. It's not efficient. We do have a lot of hazardous chemicals and exposures from recycling lithium-ion batteries. We're not there yet. And I think in the challenge of the folks in this room and the researchers that we need to be working with, that is something that we need to research further, is how do we safely and effectively and efficiently recycle the batteries that we generate, because we do rely on them not only for mining and putting them in large equipment, we also need them for every day, like our phones and our computers. So I think that's on us to look at that in the future as well. The other thing I would like to challenge everybody on is using our natural resources for conditioning the air that we send underground. That is our responsibility in managing our climate goals as well. We have supply chain problems. We have cost pressures. Many countries in the world right now are worried about energy availability. We have goals. Countries have set goals. Businesses have set goals. Provinces have set goals. And now I even hear about provinces, countries that are starting to step back and say, maybe we have to relax some of those goals, and it's all due to the pressures that are on us right now with energy and cost and supply chain. We need to make sure that any technologies that we apply to our designs and put into our mines, that they're sustainable and that they're reliable. And we also have to understand, are we introducing any risks or hazards with the technologies that we have, and what are those? It's not a problem to have a risk. We just have to understand how to manage it and recognize it. I just wanted to put this slide in to remind us why we're here today, because we're talking about ventilation systems. These systems are power consumers. The measurements that my team has helped me put together from our mines show that we measure that we consume between 50 to 80% of the power. It belongs to the ventilation systems. So if a mine site, whatever their power demand is, the ventilation systems consume that 50 to 80% of that power. So it's on us to figure out how to reduce that, because that's where we're going to get the biggest benefit of our power consumption reductions. We definitely know that we have to move materials underground, and it does take air, and these fans take power. So we look at ideas on how to reduce that. So we have looked at alternative vehicles, and now the big buzz is electric, and especially battery electric. But again, we have problems with battery. The energy intensity is lower. We have to recharge more. We're trying to figure that out as a company right now. What is that going to look like for us, and how do we make that successful? So why don't we take a look at hydrogen? Hydrogen fuel cells don't have the same problems that the battery electric motor has. We do have autonomous mining as well. That's another chance to reduce the air that we provide underground. We can't completely cut it off because our equipment needs air as well, but it does make a difference. When no one's underground, we can reduce that air volume. Let's not forget about the noise and the environmental hazard that can cause, and the noise and the hazard to people. We have to look about where we put our fans, type of fans we buy, but consider that in our designs up front, and look at our fan technology. Another example of reducing our footprint, considering the air demand of changing from diesel equipment to electric equipment. If you're in a deep hot mine, the benefit is not as great as you are if you're in a shallow mine. You can, in a mine that's cool, where we don't have heat constraints, you can achieve, it's possible to achieve, maybe up to 50% of less air underground than a traditional design. I want to talk a minute about a circular economy. What is it, really? It's using our resources wisely. We know that we are living in what I call a linear economy, where we extract, use, and throw away. That's no longer acceptable. The circular economy is all about how we never have waste. Our waste always has a new purpose. It's a social responsibility for all of us to understand, as a mining company, how do the products that we supply to the market, and who do we supply them to, how do they manage their waste? Not only do we as a company manage our waste, but how do others manage their waste that we are a direct contributor to? So everybody in here is behooved to think that same way about our waste, and how do we reuse, what ideas are out there, how do we support the research that goes into reusing, recycling, repurposing materials. Now, coming back to the data-driven, this is where I think we can bring it back to this group again. We need to be data-driven. We need to understand real-time data. One of the problems that we have today is we work with just a representative data set. We can have real-time data coming in, but are we really taking advantage of it? Are we doing the right analysis with it to make good decisions with? And the answer for me is no. And I would challenge everybody out there. Maybe we can have a debate about that later, about how do we think we do on managing our data. We have tremendous amounts of data that we can process today, but it is hard. I think it's very underestimated about the effort that it takes to be data driven, and it's a challenge, and it's a culture change, and that is all because we as people, I look at something different than you look at something, and everybody else in here has their own opinion. We have so much data that we can pull the piece that's important to us, the how, the why, the where we get the data, what do we want to believe, what do we want to listen to, what are our biases. Data-driven removes the biases. So that's where we have to be as a business. We have to make decisions strictly what the data is telling us. That's why that takes a culture change, and that's why it's hard. If we look at our modeling, which is why we're here today, thank you, Howden, for the development that you have made in the modeling world, and Craig for starting out that business. I want to talk a bit about how do we incorporate data into our designs. I see us, my vision one day is, and it's my vision, how do we have this wonderful worldwide database that we access? There's no IP, but how do we know it's reliable? How do we know where it came from? How do we know how to apply it? Because data is only arrived from a set of circumstances, and we have to know what that is. Can we apply that? Do we understand it? Are we using the right data to put in our situation? That's the challenge. But I still believe it's possible if we all put our minds together around it. And we need to be a mining community around the world, I think, that shares this data. And then where's AI? So I ask, everybody out here, AI is a scary thing. It has its challenges in itself. We'll talk about that in a minute. So I know it can go, there's a lot of talk right now about AI. Do we trust it? What's it learning? What decisions are being made from it? But do we have control of that? And that's what we have to do, is we have to get control of that. So some of our challenging quickly, cybersecurity. I think as we go into this data-driven world, that's going to be one of our biggest challenges. How fast can regulations hold us back or let us move forward? Technically, we've got mines that are continually expanding. How do we put a process network underground? It's the biggest challenge I have today. How do we convince mining people that it's possible, that we need that infrastructure? And it's expensive as well, because mines develop, we're hard on stuff, we break things, and we have these I want to say, I don't want to call them weak, but they're fragile. They're fragile systems that we put underground, and we try to keep those running, and it's difficult. Innovation. How do we apply novel technologies? How do we come up with new novel technologies? What's our approach? We're here to talk about design and modeling. What's our approach to modeling in the future? How do we become more innovative in how we use it, how we trust it? And then how do we as people put business cases together in front of our companies, in front of partners, initiatives that we're trying to develop, so that we can sell what we think is right, do what is right? And lastly, I always like to bring this slide in. I think it's important. We never stop. We will never stop changing. We will never stop improving. We're always in a cycle. The do, plan, check, act. That's the cycle we're always going to be in. We design, we build, we measure, we understand what we have, and we go back and we improve, and we just keep improving and keep improving. So in conclusion, the good news is mining is required for the products for the world, and that's how we're going to achieve net zero. It's necessary for the future for us to continue to mine. So now we have to mine responsibly. Our purpose never changes. We design and manage our vent systems that our people work in. Air is required underground, regardless of the technology, whether people there or not. And mostly, we need to care for our employees, for their well-being and the well-being of the communities that we operate in and the world that we live in. We're always going to have challenges as we drive for the solutions that we need, and the journey of change is always going to be this continuous loop. We will never stop. So I'd like to thank everybody for coming today, and thank you for giving me the chance to talk to you this morning. I'd just like us to leave this discussion thinking outside the box, be open to solutions. We can't do it alone. We rely on everybody. Everybody. Thank you.
So I'm going to kick off the question time. Maybe I can start with a question and maybe a comment. Firstly, I strongly agree with your statement regarding data. I think nowadays there's a lot of data, live data that can be used by a lot of mines, a lot more than 2-5 years ago, with all the communication being installed on the ground and sensors, etc. And I think there's a lot more that can be done with it. It's something that I'm quite passionate about. That was more of a comment, but more the question was, you mentioned hydrogen. Are you currently looking at using hydrogen vehicles in any of your mines?
We are not at the present time looking at hydrogen vehicles. Acknowledging that it's a possibility, but not currently actively looking. But I do work with the Canadian Standards Association, and we did work on a standard that now includes the use of hydrogen vehicles underground.
Right, thank you. Any other questions? No?
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
Thank you for your time, Cheryl.
Welcome.
And if you have any questions, feel free to ask her anytime.